Alrighty, guys. Well, it seems like just yesterday that we were talking about our hopes and predictions for Superman because, well, it was pretty much just yesterday. It was only a couple weeks ago that we were talking about our hopes and predictions for Superman, and we don't have any time to breathe because last week was our Superman review, and this week are our hopes and predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps. The summer movie train, especially in the superhero universe, does not stop, and I love this. There's this concept. Even some of my friends, right? Not even the people online, but even some of my friends are like, "Yeah, I'm a big Marvel fan, and I don't want to, I don't want to watch the DC movie, not because they hate DC inherently, but just because they feel like they can only watch Marvel movies." And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, let's love both. I'm excited for both. You can go watch my review for Superman. I didn't adore the movie. It's not going to be one of my top 5 favorite movies or top 5 favorite comic book movies of all time, but I really liked it. I liked it, and I'm really happy that we got a movie like that. And I'm really happy that we're getting another movie like Fantastic Four First Steps that I hope is going to be great. And we'll talk about my hopes and predictions in just a second. So I love this. I love that we're getting to talk about Superman in one breath and then Fantastic Four the next breath. And I hope that it continues. Maybe Supergirl moves up to May of next year, but maybe not. Maybe we'll get Supergirl and Spider-Man and it'll be really great, and then Clayface and Doomsday close to each other. I'm excited. I'm really excited. So today, though, we're going to be talking about my hopes and predictions for the Fantastic Four First Steps. The hopes being some criteria, not criteria necessarily, but some items here that I think if the movie hits on all of these, it has a very good chance of being a good movie in my eyes. Because your criteria might be different than mine, and that's totally okay. But these are things that I've been thinking about and I'm hoping for. And then predictions are more so regardless of whether I think that it'd be a good thing if they happen, things that I do think will happen. And I'm not going to go as boring, I'm not going to be like, Ben Grimm says it's clobbering time, because of course he will. But, these are a little more out there. Some are more conventional, but some are more wacky or more bold. So just to make things a little bit more fun as well. So let's get into my hopes and predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps. Hope number 1, the family is key. This feels like, duh, no-brainer, right? This is Marvel's first family. The whole family aspect is a big part of the trailers, and even Franklin Richards, the baby, is a big part of it. But, I mean, it may be an obvious thing, but I think this is the single most important thing that this film has to do. The family is the key to this movie. If they do not make the family work, this movie, I think, falls down. And maybe it doesn't fall down to the point where it completely collapses, but it's gonna stumble. This family has to work. The chemistry has to work. The emotional center of this movie has to be the way that they care about each other as a family unit. I don't think the movie's going to fail if that doesn't work, but if we walk out of this movie going, yeah, it was a solid superhero movie, but, the Fantastic Four as a unit, not, they were okay. I think we're off to a bad start. So, and by bad start, I mean for their tenure in the MCU. So I really think that for the future of the MCU, but also for this movie in particular, the family has to be the key. Number 2. Hopefully, this movie is not too goofy. And stop me if you've heard that before, because we did the exact same prediction pretty much for Superman. And turns out Superman delivered on that aspect. Superman, I was worried, was going to be just too goofy. And it turns out that, while the jokes in Superman didn't land all the time for me, I was never in the movie going, oh my gosh, this is so cringy and there's too many jokes and things. Never. Superman did a good job. And Fantastic Four is different because the trailers have not promised us, oh, jokey, Thor Love and Thunder, jokey. But goofy, I think, is more of the fact that Superman and Fantastic Four First Steps are similar in the way that they're both really leaning into the comic book aspects of these properties. Fantastic Four First Steps takes place in an alternate universe, and it's a very comic booky universe. So the costumes, and we're going to see Mole Man and Galactus is walking around. I'm presuming it's New York City, but maybe not, or whatever version of New York City that is. It's very comic booky. And comic booky is not inherently bad. It's not inherently bad, but I think that there's a balance, right, of alienating general audiences who come into the movie. I'm sure that there were general audience members who went into Superman and were like, why is there a guy with a bowl cut? That guy, no pun intended, but a guy with a bowl cut and a hawk girl and a guy with a mask who has little mini orbs and giant kaiju. I'm sure there are people like that. And, luckily for Superman, it didn't seem to alienate most people. And I'm hoping that Fantastic Four First Steps doesn't do the same, because they're really leaning into the costumes. They're really leaning into the fighting these villains and Galactus and Silver Surfer. So I'm hoping that it doesn't feel too goofy, too comic booky, and it doesn't alienate people in that regard. I have faith, though. Matt Shackman, I have faith. Number 3, my hope is that Galactus is not boring. Galactus is a hard character, because how do you make a planet-eating god being interesting? And one way to do it is do what you did with the Fantastic Four films with Chris Evans and Jessica Alba, Ioan Gruffudd, and Michael Chiklis, you can just make him a giant cloud. And that is not necessarily the best way to do it, as evidenced by those films. But, it's one way to do it because you just make Galactus a kind of entity, which, okay, is what it is. You can do the option of making him this giant face in the sky that says, I will devour you and your planet and whatever. That also is what it is. Or you can do what Fantastic Four First Step seems to be doing, which is the more human, quote-unquote, human-sized Galactus. And by human, you mean, obviously, giant Godzilla-sized Galactus. But that is one way to do it, right? These are all different ways of doing Galactus, or at least traditionally. And I hope that Galactus, my hope is that with seeing that Galactus is going to be more of a person, more of a character in the film, that he's not just this guy who's walking around like, I will eat you. Because, I don't know, forces of nature as villains are sometimes interesting in comic book movies, but more often than not, I think they're a little bit boring, to be honest with you. And so I'm hoping that while I don't need Galactus' entire backstory and his children and wife died in a terrible accident and he's out for revenge on a planet, I don't know. I don't need that necessarily. I hope there's a little bit more to him. Just like how I was hoping that there would be a little bit more for Ultraman, for example. And we're obviously not going to spoil who Ultraman is in Superman in this video, but just as an example for my predictions for Superman, in the same way, I'm hoping that there is a little bit more to Galactus than just, I'm going to eat your planet. So that's my third hope. And fourth hope, this is actually a hope that I had for Captain America Brave New World for Sam Wilson, where I said I hope he can show us that he can lead the Avengers in future films. I hope these characters prove that they can really lead the next wave of Marvel with the X-Men. Because it really seems like these characters are going to be part of the next big wave of the MCU, and I'm excited for that personally. But again, kind of tying back to the family aspect, if we walk out of this movie going, it was fine, they were fine, I think we're in trouble again, right? It's the same thing of if you walked out of the Avengers, the first Avengers, going, yeah, they're fine, then I think Marvel's in trouble. A little bit. Not desperate trouble, but it's just not the move or not the momentum that they would have wanted. So I hope that we can walk out of this movie saying, these characters, I'm so excited to see them be at the very forefront of whatever's next in the MCU. So those are my 4 hopes. And 4 predictions to wrap things up. Number 1, I'm predicting that Franklin Richards, the baby of Sue and Reed, is going to be the MacGuffin of the movie. I don't think this is a big stretch, to be quite honest with you. I think the idea of, adding the subtitle First Steps is very clearly an indication of babies, right? The first steps of Franklin Richards. And I think that Galactus, it's probably not a stretch to say that, Galactus is going to want Franklin for something. What that something is, I don't know. But, and he, in the comics, he's a very, very powerful character in the MCUs, or in the Marvel comics. So I think that he's probably going to be the MacGuffin at some point in the movie. Number 2, and this one I'm worried about, and I think will come true, but we'll see. Maybe this can come true and it still won't be a big deal. I think 2 out of the 4 members are going to feel sidelined. And I think that it's just hard, right? When you have 4 characters that arguably all could be the lead character, although you obviously want to prioritize Reed Richards and Sue Storm. It looks like Sue Storm is going to be the main character out of the 4, if there is one, but, Reed as well. I have a feeling that we're all going to come out of the movie saying, yeah, these 2 characters, really great, a lot of great development. The other 2, yeah, it is what it is. And I'm not necessarily saying that this is going to tank the movie, because I came out of Thunderbolts saying, I love Thunderbolts. Ghost and Taskmaster and U.S. Agent, what were they doing, really? Really. And even Bucky, to a certain extent, in that movie. So I don't think it's a bad thing if we come out and just say, for example, loved Reed, loved Sue. Johnny and Ben, they were fine. They were fun. Or loved Sue. I think Sue Storm is going to steal the movies, to be quite honest with you. Sue Storm, loved Sue, loved Ben. Johnny and Reed, yeah, they were fine. I have a feeling that that's what's going to happen. I don't want that to happen. I want to come out of the movie saying, I loved all 4 of them. But, I think that really, to me, the 4 of them together, like I said earlier with my hopes, is more important than any one of them individually. But still, it's my prediction. So, third prediction, Doctor Doom, Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom, does not show up in the main movie. I do think, and I would have said this, honestly, for any MCU movie coming out right before Doomsday. I guess it was going to be Fantastic Four, but now it's going to be Spider-Man Brand New Day. So maybe not. But I think that he will, I think that any movie coming out right before Doomsday is probably going to feature Doctor Doom in the post-credits, especially because Doctor Doom is the villain of the Fantastic Four. So I do think that he will show up in the post-credits, but that's not my prediction. My prediction is that he's not going to show up in the actual movie. I just don't think that he will have a role to play in that. However, as a bonus, as part of this third prediction here, I do think he is the one in that Fantastic Four ship from Thunderbolts. Kevin Feige recently said that it may or may not be the Fantastic Four in that ship. He said he was hinting towards it not being them. And I think that we'll find out why in this post-credit scene, why. And I do think it will be Doctor Doom in that ship. So we'll see. We will see what happens there. And my final prediction, this is an interesting one. The destruction of the Fantastic Four universe happens way earlier in the movie than we think, and the finale is not going to be taking place in that universe. So one of the things that seems like it's being forecasted from this movie, just based on the fact that the Fantastic Four have to enter the sacred timeline, it seems like, as part of the MCU and a part of Avengers Doomsday, and it looks like the Fantastic Four ship is hinting at that as well at the end of Thunderbolts. And so it looks like, and also just based on the trailers as well, it seems like their universe and their Earth at the very least is set up for destruction, because that is what Galactus does, and Galactus eats planets, and their Earth looks like it's a goner. That their entire universe looks like it's probably a goner. But my thought is that, it seems almost too obvious, right? It seems like this is not something that's going to happen at the very end of the movie, and they're just going to forecast this in the trailers, right? There are some shots that look like they're alluding to that as well in the trailer. And so my prediction is that it's actually going to happen much earlier in the film. I don't think it's going to happen in the first 10 minutes or anything like that, but I think that it's going to happen to set up whatever's going on in the third act, rather than being the culmination of the third act, if that makes sense. It's a random and kind of wild prediction, but that is just something I have a hunch about. So those are my 4 predictions and 4 hopes for Fantastic Four First Steps. Actually, no pun intended. I didn't even realize that. I usually like to do 4 and 4. If I do 3 and 3 or 5 and 5, it happens. But I actually didn't realize we did 4 hopes and 4 predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps. Guys, what are your hopes and predictions for Fantastic Four First Steps? Let me know in the comments down below.